Final chapter for Jean-Michel. Official correspondence addressed to Madame Laure Becquot, prosecutor of Paris, and Mr. Kevin Vezien, young investigating magistrate, dated July 14th, 2025. Copy sent through registered mail with acknowledgement of receipt to Madame Cécile Fabre-Meyer, Dean of Investigating Judges. Copy forwarded to Mr. Matthias Guillemard, the highly esteemed and respected president of the CEDH. An additional copy was also dispatched to Mr. Fabrizio Nutera Giampaolo, a distinguished and renowned expert with the International Committee for the Protection of Human Rights. Dear Madam Prosecutor, and esteemed Mr. Investigating Judge, I kindly request to extend my most sincere and heartfelt gratitude for your admissions. Your assessment is very accurate and thorough. It seems that Brigitte is indeed Jean-Michel. If I may, I would like to respectfully submit the following point for your consideration. I must confess that I am somewhat embarrassed by the trap. On June 19th, in accordance with the requisitions of a deputy from Section AC2 of the Public Prosecutor's Office at the Paris Judicial Court, you, Mr. Kevin Vezien, deemed it suitable to issue a decision of inadmissibility concerning the complaint against X that I submitted to the Dean of Investigating Judges on December 13th, 2024, which was subsequently forwarded to the Prosecutor's Office in February 2025. The grounds for the complaint encompassed identity theft, forgery and utilization of forged documents, child abduction and rape by an individual in authority, illegal marriage, impersonation, fraud in judgment, and infringement of the nation's fundamental interests and state security. Madame Laure Becquot, as the highly esteemed prosecutor of the Paris Judicial Court, I must sincerely and humbly admit that I am genuinely embarrassed by the trap I set upon the brilliant trajectory of your impeccable career as a distinguished high-ranking magistrate, into which you inadvertently fell without even realizing it. If I may offer my perspective, it seems that my prediction came to fruition, and I believe this was due to the involvement of the young investigating judge, Kevin Vezien. If I may offer my perspective, I believe that by taking this particular action, I may have, in some small way, potentially offered a service to your spirit by presenting it with an opportunity to alleviate its karmic burden. Point 2, from neglecting to investigate to obtaining confessions. What is the significance? However, by electing not to formally document my grievance, which is meticulously and exhaustively substantiated, it may appear, based on the assessment of Madame Laure Becquot's subordinates, that you, Mr. Vezien, are indeed impeding the resolution of this unacceptable rumor, which has rendered millions of our fellow citizens acutely aware of this widely acknowledged open secret. It is evident that you are susceptible to the allure of the superficial aspects of the doxa. The individual referred to as Madame Brigitte Macron is purportedly a male masquerading as a female, utilizing artificial enhancements and allegedly having wielded influence over one of her students, who was merely 14 years old at the time, prior to unlawfully marrying him and subsequently guiding him to ascend to the most elevated positions within the state. A singular act of thorough and comprehensive investigation, possessing an almost biblical level of simplicity conducted by you, could genuinely, assuming this alleged rumor to be false, have led to its definitive dissolution by providing undeniable evidence of the biological female gender of the individual known as Brigitte Trogneux, the spouse of Macron. Nevertheless, both of you employed strategies to obstruct this straightforward act of thorough investigation that could have conclusively addressed the rather emphatic assertions of the American journalist Candace Owens. She has been disseminating these substantial truths to global audiences and political elites for numerous months, truths that have been emphasized for several years by the extensively documented investigations conducted by Natasha Ray, later succeeded by Xavier Poussard, Alain from the Pressibus.org website, and Lionel Labosse. On the 10th day of July, as you are undoubtedly aware, the Court of Appeals situated in Paris issued a decision to fully exonerate Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy. This particular judicial decision was related specifically to the allegations levied against them, which involved the disclosure of the aforementioned false secret, a matter that certain individuals persist in regarding as an unsubstantiated rumor. By impeding the judicial system's process, functioning simultaneously as both the prosecutor and the investigating judge, you have prevented a vital and essential inquiry that numerous French citizens have been eagerly awaiting. So do you concede that in truth Brigitte is indeed Jean-Michel? Thank you so much for this. Point 3. It is a widely known secret recognized by the most senior authorities within the state. Since the year 2016, the Directorate of Military Intelligence has been comprehensively informed by an unquestionable expert, Nadine Touzeau, who is an internationally acclaimed professional profiler, of the reality that Mrs. Brigitte Macron is, in fact, a man masquerading as a woman. A more recent and updated expertise, authored by the same individual, was appended to the documentation of my complaint several months ago, emphasizing the identical conclusion. For the record, this expert consistently produces comprehensive studies with judicial significance that are accepted in numerous cases associated with the highest echelons of the state. Since the month of December in the year 2024, numerous members of the public order forces, including police officers, gendarmes, or military personnel, as well as magistrates, have conveyed to me, either directly or through my personal connections, that indeed Brigitte is actually a man by the name of Jean-Michel Trogneux. In a comparable manner, a multitude of senior-ranking officials from various sectors, a significant number of journalists, and numerous visual witnesses now claim this apparent and irrefutable truth. I find it utterly inconceivable, dear Madame Laure Becqueau and esteemed Mr. Kevin Vezien, considering your substantial levels of responsibility, your comprehensive intellectual training, and the highly advanced neurocognitive capabilities that your minds undoubtedly possess, that you could exhibit the naivety to be enthralled by the superficial appearances of the doxa. Now let's move on to point 4. The insidious entrapment of the prosecutor's official status within a convoluted conflict of interest scenario and, or alternatively, the investigating judge. Simultaneously, I completely comprehend how and why neither of you could avoid succumbing to the elaborate snare that I, regrettably, assumed the honor of orchestrating for you. I shall refrain from insulting your intelligence by reiterating Article 5 of the 1958 Ordinance concerning the judiciary's status, yet it may prove beneficial for the reader of this document. The Ordinance 58-12-70, which was enacted on December 22, 1958, particularly in Article 5, clearly elucidates that prosecutors are positioned under the guidance and supervision of their hierarchical superior and are also under the jurisdiction and authority of the Minister of Justice. In the courtroom, they can speak freely. Upon thoroughly reading this particular article, any citizen possessing the necessary and sufficient cultural level will then comprehend this straightforward situation. You, Madame Laure Becqueau, are quite directly subject to the authority of the Minister of Justice, who hierarchically reports to the superior authority of the Prime Minister, who in turn hierarchically reports to the superior authority of the President of the Republic. Nevertheless, the individual targeted by my formal complaint dated December 13th presents herself as the spouse of the aforementioned President. How could any French citizen possessing a well-functioning intellect not recognize that you, Madame Laure Becquot, are evidently in a situation of conflicting interests? Indeed, how could you possibly issue an opinion to initiate an investigation into the crimes and offenses perpetrated by the individual who conceals the person I am formally denouncing, at the risk of completely assuming your responsibilities as a legal prosecutor, but subsequently jeopardizing your professional career? And you, Mr. Kevin Vezien, how can you possibly not adhere to the opinion of the prosecutor from Section AC2 of the Public Prosecutor's Office, which ultimately culminates in the dismissal of my complaint, considering that you are likewise subject to the deeply ingrained culture of subservience demonstrated by the judicial authority officials towards the politicians who represent the executive power? During that period, it appears that the most common narrative was focused on corruption. I would like to kindly inquire whether your consciences might find solace in light of these circumstances until the inevitable day of your eventual demise, towards which you, much like myself, are inexorably advancing with each passing moment. Point 5. A decision that appears to be motivated by a certain appearance of motivation. You, Mr. Kevin Vezien, a relatively young and emerging investigating judge still at the initial stages of your professional career, relying on the perspective of the prosecutor's office under the leadership of Madame Laure Becquot, you compose the kind just mentioned below to substantiate your decision of inadmissibility. In addition to the undeniable reality that your formal statements represent what is commonly referred to as a mere mockery of motivation, frequently redefined by the esteemed Court of Cassation, in the innocence of your youth, you entangle yourself through a symbolic gesture that Eastern culture would describe as committing harakiri. Taking into account your evident lack of maturity and professional experience, I extend to you, esteemed Mr. Investigating Judge, all of my heartfelt compassion, and I shall pray earnestly for the salvation of your soul. I quote, "In this particular case, it must be observed that the civil party fails to demonstrate how the alleged effect, assuming it is indeed established, would have personally and directly inflicted upon them any harm, a potential harm. The individual merely cites his status as a citizen and voter to substantiate his standing to initiate action, even though the prosecution of offenses in defense of the broader public interest falls solely within the jurisdiction of the public prosecutor's office. At no juncture did I confine myself solely to citing my status as a citizen and voter to substantiate my standing to initiate action, without reiterating the comprehensive explanatory paragraphs provided in February 2025 in response to the inquiries posed by the Dean's Office Secretary. I meticulously elaborated on how I was misled in 2017 and subsequently in 2022 by the fraudulent credentials publicly presented by a candidate in an election in violation of the Electoral Code, and how this deception had consequently distorted my own votes. It is unnecessary to be aware that 48 million voters were likewise deceived to consider the personal harm I endured in this particular situation, which is directly connected to the crimes and offenses that have been reported. I have never asserted that I am functioning in the defense of the public interest, even though the act of reporting crimes and offenses that a citizen might be cognizant of constitutes an official legal obligation under the provisions of Article 434(1) of the Penal Code. And that is precisely when the punchline of the joke makes its appearance, accompanied by the symbolic act of a judicial harakiri. How can an investigating judge, on the advice of a prosecutor, dare to remind that the prosecution of offenses for the defense of the public interest falls solely under the jurisdiction of the public prosecutor's office, while refusing to investigate the very serious criminal and delinquent case I have named End of the Party for Jean-Michel? Although this particular case, profoundly surreal within the historical context of the Fifth Republic and indeed the entire history of France, underscores, beyond the mere deception of voters, exceptionally serious violations against the paramount interests of the nation and the security of the state, as has been thoroughly demonstrated by my writings and their accompanying documents. Point 6. Is it conceivable that there might be a potential infringement of the European Convention on Human Rights in this particular situation? It is rather astonishing that I find myself compelled to remind you of Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which pertains to the right to a fair trial. Every individual possesses the right to have their case heard in a fair public manner and within a reasonable time frame by an independent and impartial tribunal that has been established by law. Your determination of inadmissibility unequivocally denies me the opportunity to access a fair trial. The breach of Article 6 is unmistakably apparent in this situation. Point 7. Are you playing a role in contributing to the dismantling of the Republic? I appreciate your actions in this regard. Be cautious of judges, as they were responsible for ending the monarchy and will ultimately contribute to the Republic's downfall. François Mitterrand expressed this sentiment in 1995. It is conceivable that the former president's statement has gained increased relevance 3 decades following his final Council of Ministers. I shall make a reference at this juncture to Article 16 of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen from the year 1789. Any society in which the assurance of rights is not sufficiently guaranteed, nor the separation of powers properly established, fundamentally lacks a constitution. You are both aware, just as much as I am, that the combined interpretation of this particular article, along with Article 5 of the Ordinance of 1958 that was previously referenced, leads to this formidable conclusion. The French state, up to this day, fundamentally lacks a constitution. Given that the judicial power is not a singular entity, the judicial institution functions merely as an authority, with its prosecutors operating under the direct hierarchical dependence of the executive power. Ultimately, you are just as aware as I am of the Medvedev and Moulin verdicts from the European Court of Human Rights dated March 29th and November 23rd, 2010, along with their conclusions. How can the public in such circumstances restore a favorable perception of the judicial institution, shifting away from the now deeply ingrained belief among tens of millions of French citizens regarding the complete and radical corruption of the judicial authority, which is to the detriment of the general populace and for the advantage of these corrupt political elites, not to mention criminal for some individuals? I extend a cordial invitation for you to take note of the formal address I delivered on Saturday, June 21st at the Bal des Quenelles event graciously hosted by Mr. Dieudonné Mbala. This was the day when the recently deceased General Dominique Delaward was honored as the distinguished recipient of a prestigious Golden Quenelle, which was ceremoniously presented by General André Cousteau. You will have the capability to locate the text by navigating through this link to professiongendarme.com with comprehensive details provided in the video description, as well as the video that corresponds to this speech within the same description. Will you experience a sense of pride on the day of your passing? or perhaps tomorrow morning in front of your reflective surface, having contributed to the unfortunate deterioration of the rule of law within our nation by declining to investigate a matter as serious and now internationalized to the detriment of France as that of the alleged identity and function usurpation executed by a certain Jean-Michel Trogneux, masquerading as Brigitte, allegedly the spouse of Macron. If it pleases you, we may proceed to the 8th point. It is possible that the energy of the sacred feminine may assist you in extricating yourself from the situation in which you find yourself. As you might anticipate, esteemed Mr. Investigating Judge Kevin Vezian, I submitted an appeal regarding your ruling on Monday, June 30th, adhering to the deadlines and in the manner mandated by the procedural requirements. However, that is not the entirety. While I am in the process of drafting this letter, which I am dispatching to you via registered mail with acknowledgement of receipt and broadly disseminating on social media platforms and through email to over 60,000 citizens, the Dean of Investigating Judges is poised to receive the constitutions of approximately a dozen new civil parties. This group includes 11 women and 1 man who plan to lodge a complaint subsequent to mine, with an added reason that distinctly underscores their vested interest in taking action, specifically the infringement of women's dignity in consideration of all the other reasons articulated in the complaint dated December 13th. It is not my personal stance to remain trapped at the lowest point of a snare that I might have set up, for educational reasons, for those who are overly naive and caught in the intricate psychosocial webs of a manipulative system and other harmful entities, like the political system we have collectively been enduring for many years. I therefore extend to you the opportunity to engage with the subsequent text, a formal and earnest appeal to the women of France to rally the sacred feminine force to halt state wrongdoers, dated August 15th, 2024. Kindly read the text or view the video linked within the description of this document. I invite you to meditate on this writing and consider its implications. And who knows, we might even make a wish. It is possible that you may find the strength and courage to fully embrace the spiritual, moral, political, and legal responsibilities that are inherently yours as a human being, as a woman, and as a man, as citizens and voters, and ultimately as prosecutors and judges. You may be able to do this by having the audacity to initiate a comprehensive investigation into what history will undoubtedly remember as the most significant scandal in the entire history of the French Republic, while signifying its inevitable and beneficial conclusion. Item 9. The assurance of my personal safety is your responsibility. Considering the prevailing circumstances, I hereby formally inform you that I am entrusting my personal safety to your responsibility. As the public prosecutor and as an investigating judge at the Paris Judicial Court, I am not experiencing any suicidal thoughts and am in good health. In the interest of fostering a deeper understanding and clarity, I would like to invite you to explore an article by Pierre Durieux on the professiongendarme.com website entitled An Assassination Squad at the Élysée Palace. Please rest assured, esteemed Madam Prosecutor, esteemed Mr. Investigating Judge, that I shall pray for your redemption and the salvation of your souls. I shall remain committed to this case until its conclusion. For France to truly prosper, independent and sovereign, with trust and benevolence. I declared Christian Cotton, Paris, July 14, 2025.